We can get going. So you guys haven't met before, eh? Ray? Rowena's a
No, we
guide at
haven't.
Rowena's a guide at LU, Ray. So she's
Oh,
a
fantastic.
knowledgeable lady with lots of wisdom.
Well, I guess I guess
No,
I'm the opposite. So
no, I
very
mean,
pleased
I
to
don't
meet
think,
you.
no, not at all. I've actually had 5 weeks where I haven't been guiding because the last person, she sort of, I think life became a bit busy for her. And so she seemed to sort of say she would get back to me. So I can chase
Hmm.
her up and I will, I just wanted to get straight sort of back into a routine, having been in the States for a month. So
I see.
yeah, so
So do you guys have like specific numbers of people that you guide for like only one at a time, two at a time, or something like that? I
I
don't
think
know.
Vince takes lots of people, and then I do, one or two. I've done two, but I don't. Yes, I don't like to be overwhelmed by.
I see. So, but it's kind of just different for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, cool.
some people
Very
take on
cool.
lots and they can handle it. Others,
Yeah.
I always used to spend about an hour with each person every night. So if I took on three, there'd be 3 hours of
Yeah.
work before I could go to sleep. So yeah.
That's
But,
very intense.
uh,
Or to me, that would be, unfathomable. Um, kind of with just how everything, well, I don't know. Anyhow, yeah, so I'm still working on I'm working with Stacy, kind of, in that like I was gone. I feel bad because I feel like I've been a very difficult person to work with, not intentionally necessarily. But yeah, it just so she sent me a bunch of meditations to listen to, and I was just like, all right, let me listen to these and get back to you. And then the other day I checked back in. I was like, hey, haven't talked in a while. I finally listened to all those meditations. And she's like, you're supposed to check in like every day. I was like, oh no, I'm sorry. I've been working on these meditations. And so yeah, so I am sort of what do you call it? Still definitely figuring things out. And yesterday I spent a long time on the meditations. Basically, it was almost like a penance to Stacy, where I was like, all right, let me go back through everything and like get back up to speed so I can, be give the good, thorough response that she deserves. And yeah, I mean, I think there is some insight there that was very yeah, who's to say whether it was profound or not? But uh, yeah, I don't know. There's and Vince also from the last time we talked, it was a lot about kind of surrender and acceptance. Um, and yeah, there is something that I think sort of I got to a place where I was able to sort of see um I guess the context for the story that's going on. And I'm still very much in the story as like the character of myself, but I've kind of recognized that I don't really have any true volition, and for that reason, a lot of the um yeah, I don't it's still confusing. I'm still kind of settling into it, but it's basically just like I have no choice but to feel and think everything that I'm thinking and feeling. And that does kind of remove a lot of the hesitation, doubt, um, suffering, that kind of thing. But I'm still sort of settling into it, I guess. But that's interesting. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's tweak a few things for you there.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's good what you say. It sounds good. First thing that pricked my ears up was when you said you had some insight, but you don't know how profound it was.
Hmm.
Any insight is profound
Mm.
because those insights are what will change beliefs.
Mm.
You can't change a belief on purpose. You have no volition about dropping a belief or adopting a new belief or anything like that. It happens or it doesn't happen, and it happens for a complex lot of reasons. But when you have an insight, that is a discovery.
Hmm.
That is a recognition that something is different to the way you used to see it. So that's a big thing because that's a foundation upon which other things are built. So it is valuable. And one of the things that we see as guides all the time is people having lots of mini shifts that they simply overlook. They say it wasn't big and huge, so therefore it wasn't important, and they disregard it.
Hmm.
Where in fact they add up all those little things, and so some people don't ever have one big huge epiphany and go, oh, I'm awake now. And some people go, you know what? I think it snuck up on me. You know, it's there. It's happened, but I can't say that it happened at any one time or any one point. It's just now I just realise that I'm behaving differently. I'm reacting differently to how I used to 12 months ago. That
Hmm.
kind of thing is more common than the big epiphany that people hang out for. You know, the bells and whistles frequently don't
Yeah.
happen. And they're pretty meaningless when they do happen. So you get people that have this huge big shift and they go, wow, wow, the world is so different now, you know. And they're in what we call a honeymoon period. And guess what? All honeymoon periods end.
Mm.
And when they do, what do they end with? They end with the arrival of doubt. So then we have to work through doubt. Whereas those ones who it sneaks up on, we're working through doubt every day. So when they do get there, there's very likely no doubt around.
Yeah.
Or if there is, it's pretty easy to cope with because we've examined a lot of the foundation stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally. Yeah, it is an I think the way that I would characterize it now, which, well, the kind of my experience of it now is that, I still most of the time am identified with this character of who I am, but there is an understanding that's always lurking in the background that I have no agency, right? And so it's not like, oh man, what am I gonna like? Which of the thing that used to plague me, or like, a large proportion of my daily suffering is like, should I do this or should I do that? Am I doing the wrong thing here? Like, am I making the wrong choice? And kind of seeing that there's not really a choice to be made, and um, there's not really a choice to be made. And even like the worrying about which choice to make is something that I have no choice but to experience, is a relief in a way. It's something that I can't really it's something I can't really appreciate unless I like settle down and think about it. But in the back of my, like, it's always there. Like it's fairly
Yeah.
easy for me to like touch into and be like, oh, freaking out, and then it's just like, oh, of course I am,
Yeah,
and so
gotcha. Yeah. This is a big one. This is a really big one because this is probably the foundation upon which everything rests, right? So if
yeah.
and 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 I'm what I'm hearing from you is that you haven't made a connection yet, just a simple connection that between recognizing what you do, that you're not running the show.
Hmm.
Essentially, it seems to be running itself, and that as a result of that, you might as well kick back and enjoy the ride,
Yeah.
aka acceptance,
Yeah.
right? So you haven't got that sense of acceptance, even though you've got the foundation for it there,
Hmm.
and the foundation is that things happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm still, this was like basically yesterday evening where I was just kind of like, there's something different here. I spent a lot of time with this yesterday. And so this morning I woke up and it was kind of like, I was asking a friend who's, in non-dual circles or something. I was like, so like, is there anything I'm supposed to do right now? And then I was like, well, but then it was like, oh, so not really. Like I can just basically do whatever I feel like doing because I don't have a choice anyway. There's no way that I can fuck it up or do it right. And so just kind of like relax a little bit. And
Absolutely, yeah. So there's that's another tricky one. So we don't want to arrive at what you would call a nihilistic place, right?
mhm,
Nihilism is not what we aim for here. And if that does happen, then that's an incomplete uh,
yeah.
thing that yeah we need to finish off in order to get past that nihilism.
Mhm,
All right, so let's just complicate things a little bit. You don't
mhm,
run the show. There's no
mhm,
self in there making decisions and deciding to do this and having a choice about so and so and so on. But it appears as if, and at a practical level, this is important, choices are made. It
mhm,
appears as if choices are made. So we could construct a story that says, well, choices happen, but rather than me doing it, it's the outcome of circumstances.
mhm,
Right? So it only appears like a choice because the mind puts up alternatives beside each other, and then one of those gets acted on or not. Maybe another
mhm.
one gets acted on, but regardless, it appears like there are alternatives, and so it appears like there's a choice. So at a practical level, you could say, well, life chooses. And it's a
Mhm.
story. It's not nothing accurate about it, but it's a way of looking at it that makes sense. Life chooses. So choices do happen. And although there's no let's put it another way. Although good and bad, right and wrong, etc., all of that are made up stories made up by society or by our culture, they are stories, but they do have consequences, right? So whatever choice happens, there will be consequences. Now it's much
Yeah.
more complex than just simply cause and effect. But nevertheless it's a way of looking at things. So you don't get a get out of jail free card to go around and murder people and say, oh well, there's no self here and I didn't do it. It just happened.
Mhm.
There are always consequences. So there's something that we presumably will need to live with. So we take that into account. So we don't know where our thoughts come from or where
Mhm.
they go to after. They've been around
Mhm.
for that millisecond or whatever that they're there. But the thoughts that do arrive, they tell us something. And so you could have described yourself as a moral person, and that says something about your attitude towards choices that happen and whatever turns up, you know. But of course, it's a story, but it does describe something actual in terms of your habitual response to things.
Hmm.
But it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that as a result of that description that you are a moral person or that the self in there is a moral person. That's just a story again that we create. And stories have a use in terms of communication, but we don't get sucked into believing that they're actual. They're just a convenience for talking to other people or even explaining things to ourselves. We use story to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think like the deepest point I was able to sort of touch, I mean, and this was in meditation yesterday, was like getting to a point where even the concept of ownership and identity in general was just like maybe that's not a thing. It wasn't like a very clear understanding. Like it was something that I could just barely touch into, but it's just like the whole idea of identity and possession is just like that might not be a true thing. But then, every like this character that I am who feels like he has free will and understanding will never understand that, right?
That's
Like
right. Yeah, great. Yeah,
incapable, like
that's it.
fundamentally incapable. And that is still who I identify as, like in my day-to-day experience. I mean, it's only been like 2 days, but like that's still where I most of my experience is. But when I'm in this experience as this character, I'm just like, there's no way that I can understand any of that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, sure.
Like,
Yeah, yeah. And that's
and
reasonable.
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so let's put it another way to describe things that when you're, let's say, at work, you're
Hmm.
doing your doctoring stuff or whatever, you're
Hmm.
you're in a kind of a role. You're in a
Hmm.
character called Dr. Ray. Okay,
Hmm.
so if we describe that as it being actual, straight away bells ring and we go, no, 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 that's not the way things really are. That's just a description, right? So let's
Hmm.
put it another way. You will you will on many occasions behave as if there is a self in there running your show.
Hmm.
And you do that because it's convenient, because it's a way of dealing with the person in front of you, talking to them, communicating to them. If you said, "Oh, look, you're talking to nobody. There's nobody here that you're talking to," you're going to just confuse them, aren't you? You're going to
Hmm.
cause all sorts of problems, and you're not going to have a good communication. So you need to say, you know, I want you to do this. Well, they'll think that there's a self in there saying, I want you to do this.
Hmm.
And that's fine. You allow that to happen. You're not going to correct them. You're not going to say, no, no, there's no self in here. So you will
Hmm.
behave as if there is somebody running the show. But you know that if you stop and look at it, what will be revealed is that that's not the case.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so gradually that's a de-identification.
Hmm. And so, I mean, there's a part of me, part of the question I posed to my friend, which is like, is there anything I'm supposed to be doing right now? Is there's definitely
I
an
hope your friend
impulse.
burst into laughter when that question.
Well, no, it was by text. I hope
Oh,
so too. I hope he laughed a lot, but you know, but it was basically so I experienced this sort of this thought or this like impulse that's like, oh, well, I should sit there and like look at this all the time, you know? But on the other hand, I know that that's not really my choice to do that. Or like, I'm not choosing whether or not I'm gonna do that.
mm,
And so in the event that I don't end up doing that, I live my life as sort of like this identified character human being. That's, first of all, it's not my choice. And second of all, as long as I'm still in contact with the idea that, or, as long as I'm still in contact with the idea that I have no volition and that I'm not choosing any of this, it's like okay to be identified, I guess. I'm not sure if that's
Yeah, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. So, so can you see the contradiction or the conflict between the two ideas of A, that there's nobody in there running the show, and
Yeah.
B, should I do something?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes, because I still feel like a somebody who can do something.
Right, right.
Um,
Okay. So, yeah, so that's okay. Do you
yeah,
recognize that that feeling
yeah.
is the result of a lifetime of conditioning and that it's actually what you feel, but not what is actual? Can you see the
Like
difference?
kind of. I can sense that only when I'm like sitting still and kind of looking at it. But even when I'm not sitting still and looking at it, and I feel like I'm a person who can do all this stuff, there's still like I'm still in contact with the idea that I'm not actually picking any of this, and so like don't stress yourself out about it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
for me, that's like the least effortful thing that I can do is just
yeah,
like continue to live your life and don't stress out about it. Like you'll feel like you're making choices, and that's part of the reason why I asked my friend. It's like, is there anything I'm supposed to be doing right? Like, should I be like grinding away on the fetters, like on the sixth the lesson of Fetter 2, like should I just is now the time that I really need to like sit down and sequester myself and work on these fetters? And then immediately, as soon as I like sent that question, I was like, but actually, like I'm just gonna do whatever because I don't get to choose. And if I do that, I do that. If I don't, I don't. It's not my decision. I can't fuck this up or get it right. Like it's not up to me.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
good one.
that all
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
Um,
So,
but
so
it's just
consider this.
weird.
Consider
Yeah,
that you've had what I don't know how old you are, 30 or 40 years of
yeah,
conditioning that says
yeah.
you are a person, you're running the show, you're responsible for what happens, so make good decisions, etc., etc. And you've had
Mhm.
a total of 7 minutes of hitting that idea that there's nobody there doing all of that. And
Yeah,
so, can you see the balance, or the imbalance? There's the huge imbalance.
yeah.
Lifetime of conditioning for one way that you're now
Hmm.
starting to question. You're now going, well, hang on a minute. How come I've been lied to all my life? Well, it's because
Yeah.
the people who are lying to you, and they're not lying, they're telling you what they believe. It's the truth for them.
Hmm.
So here we go. So we've got a very, very novel, very, very new way of looking at what actually goes on. So what we want to
Hmm.
do is give you the tools to examine these things when they turn up. Once
Hmm.
you've got those tools under your belt, you can do all this stuff for yourself. But let me tell you
Hmm.
something else that's of value for you. You will know when you're. I always have trouble with this one. When you're awake, you'll know it,
Hmm.
right? And one of the reasons you'll know it is because this whole idea about what I should be doing, this whole idea of looking for answers will just drop. It'll just not
Hmm.
be there anymore. You won't have any answers, but neither will you be obsessed about finding them. So
Hmm.
that'll be the indicator that you've crossed a threshold for you when things
Hmm.
just drop like that, and there'll be a sense of okayness about the whole thing. So
Yeah.
a lot of it is changing habit. So what we're doing is we're moving our predominant uh, brain activity from left brain to right brain.
Hmm.
And the left brain has a use, very much has a use. It's where all the structure is and where all of the consideration of outcomes go and all the rest of it, whereas the right brain just goes, it's like the stone hippie. It just says, "Oh, this is just fucking wonderful. Love it, love it, love it, love it." It doesn't care what it is, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny because when I hear you talking about the conditioning and sort of like, well, this is a lifetime, 39 years versus 7 minutes, like I immediately get this feeling of like, oh, well, that means I need to hit this hard. I need to like blow this thing wide open. But
yeah,
but again, I'm still in contact with the idea that's like that's not up to me. Like feeling that way is not up to me, and then whether or not I pursue that is not up to me. So why like just don't stress about it? So it's almost like
absolutely.
I'm teetering on the edge of this like letting go of it, but I'm definitely not there. Like I'm still
Yeah,
like I feel it like, oh man, like let's get to work.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
on some level, I'm just like, that's not up to me. And
yeah.
so whether or not that happens, I'm not going to feel guilty if it doesn't happen or like proud of myself if it does. It's just
Yeah, good
like it
stuff.
is what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that letting
Um,
Yeah.
go can be triggered with one sentence. It doesn't
Mm.
it doesn't have to be a big complex thing. It can just be something that goes and you suddenly go, "Oh yeah, look at that." Okay. And then out the other side is everything is different. It's like somebody changes the lighting on life. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I was going to ask you, Ray, a little bit, but what Vince just said. Oh yeah. So when you say, oh well, it's not up to me anyway, um,
Mm.
how does that land in you? When you just say, oh, stop all that. Okay, it's not up to me. It's all just happening anyway. How do you experience that reflection that arises?
Um, so definitely I think the predominant thing would be relief, in a way, because like so much of my suffering that I've had up until now is like, am I doing the right thing? Like I'm second guessing myself. The choices I make are not good enough. There's also like a confusion where I just know that there's no way for me as the identified character to understand this. And so I'm just like, well, the predominant thing is relief, I think, and then yeah,
Yeah, that's a
and the what?
it's a really good indicator of, in a way of being on the right track, because contraction of, am I doing the right thing? And all the, the when we get into contracted state, that's going into doing. And when there's this, oh, well, there isn't anyone doing that's a realization, of letting things be, and that there isn't a doer. So it's a reaffirming body sense of that reflection that you're making. So you're getting like a feedback from yourself
Yeah.
um, that yeah.
Yeah, like everything is kind of taken care of. I don't know.
Because
Yeah,
you could be
something like
saying,
that.
oh well, there's nobody doing it anyway, but I'm still going to keep on, and
Right.
then that wouldn't be a good feedback.
Yeah. And not to say that that's not like that's definitely not entirely gone. There's a part of me that's like, I think I've seen a little bit, like I need to see more and I need to make it clear, but like I know that is like not up to me, right? Like I have no choice but to feel that way, but I also understand that feeling that way is not going to get me anything, or change anything in any way, good or bad. Um, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, something like that.
Just conditioned responses that have to
Yeah.
sort of make their way out of
Yeah.
the system.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now, I mean, now I kind of get what people say when they're just like, well, now you get to like see some of these things like work themselves out, I guess, you know, um, which may be interesting. And it's all a bit, it's still a very new thing for me right in this moment. And it's like also tricky because I've like listened to and been working on this stuff from a very self-identified um perspective for a really long time. And so it's like, yeah, I don't know. Now I'm thinking to myself, like, I just don't want to confuse myself. But again, I'm still in contact with the idea that like if I confuse myself, that's just what happens. And I don't know. So I keep like, yeah, I'm kind of like every so often I get distracted and kind of like bump into a little wall, and then it's like, okay. And then I don't know. I really don't have anything else to say about it. Yeah,
Yep.
it's a bit silly. Yeah.
You're doing well. You're doing well. It's I mean, when I listen to you talk, I listen for attitude as well. I mean, I don't do that consciously, but that's something that I pick up on, and I have good feelings about your attitude. You know, your openness to all of this, to recognizing. See, so nobody is going to try and change a belief for you, right? That will happen, but that's not the prime goal in anything. So the thing is to help you to do this stuff for yourself, to learn how to use tools that will reveal what is actual. And it's always about that. It's never about let's change a story to a different one. I mean, that will happen too, but it's a case of learning how to see what is actual, to differentiate between what is actual and what the brain puts up in front of us as actual, which actually isn't actual, but rather a construct. So one thing, well, here's a meme that will be really helpful for you. If there's a thought stream going and it is about something, then it is a story, a concept, right? It is not the actual thing. It is always
Mhm.
about something, and they're the things that you can either dismiss or drop way, way, way down on the level of uh, even considering whether it's actual. If it's about, then it's a concept. It's just an idea, and it's not the actual thing. And see, this is the problem in our society. We've been teaching people for years and years and years that what things are about is something that is actual, and that they need to have a life and death response to that idea. So you can see that when people protect their reputation. What a joke that is. People are prepared to kill to protect their reputation. Right? And what's a reputation? Just stories about. There's nothing actual in there at all. And yet we can have this response that it's so important. And so it even it even gets it even gets to the point where people will relate to their idea of what's in front of them as if it were actual. That is, the person that's in front of them, or the tree that's in front of them, or whatever. Anything is a brain construct, right? And that people will take it to be the real thing.
Mhm.
And we don't realize where people can't discriminate between what is a brain construct, right? You might say an image, but it's more than an image. It's a hologram, if you like, and what is the actual thing. People don't even see the actual thing. They stop because the brain is a predictive organ,
Mhm.
and it takes the minimum amount of data to complete the story. That's just a labour saving device that we do as humans. And so you walk along the path and you see a mass of green up in the air, and you go tree, and you relate to that what the brain says as a tree, and not the actual tree. And you do that with people. You go, I know this person, I know what they're about, I know where they're coming from, and you relate to that. And you don't even hear the words that are coming out of their mouth because you're already overlaying it with your idea about what they're about. Yeah, so this is part of why we say why the names of waking up and liberation and those things have a kind of a relevance to it, because we get we get out from the prison of our ideas about the world and start relating to what is actual.
Mm. So, I mean, as far as what's actual, I think that is a bit of a tricky thing for me. When you say like actual, like the actual experience of another person, are you kind of talking about that as like consciousness, or like the direct experience of that person being what's actual, or like what I don't know. It's a bit confusing. Or are we saying that there's like a separate metaphysical person, or
No, no, nothing as esoteric as any of that. Yeah.
okay.
I mean, that may or may not have a place, but it's not
Yeah.
really what I'm talking about.
Okay.
You can get it that, let's say, especially, it's much more predominant in, let's say, using as an example, people. So people that we know, right? So that is let's be much more clear about what we say when we say people we know, people that we're familiar with,
Mm,
right? We have ideas about where they're coming from and how they see the world and so on. And we relate to those ideas of them.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're standing in front of us and they're not saying a word, but we're interpreting their looks and their body language as saying something that fits our idea.
Hmm.
So we have this thing called confirmation bias. So if they move their hand in a certain way, part of us goes, oh yeah, yeah, that's I know what that means,
Hmm.
and it's got nothing to do with that person. It's just our idea of that person, right? So when I say actual, yeah, that's a bit of a tricky one because the actual is what I would say, what I would call the absolute, right? So that is an unknowable quantity, quality. That
Hmm.
what's actually going on there. So when I say actual, I'm really talking about. Yeah, this gets tricky, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Um, see,
We don't have to get into it. I mean, yeah, we
yeah,
don't have to get into it. I worry that I might be like stretching too far with asking
don't.
some of
No.
these questions.
All right. Well,
You know what I
well, well, worry away. You've got no choice about that. But
mean?
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true. That's true.
it's not an
But
issue here. Yeah.
yeah, I just feel very much like a like I'm still identified like most of the time, and in my experience, and like if I see another person, I still feel like I still have all of those same ideas and things that come up.
And you will, and
Eh,
you will. Okay, they
Yeah.
come up because they're there,
Mm,
right? And so
mm,
what we do is we accept the fact that they come up, but
mm,
if we examine them, we can easily see that those ideas are built on a history and that they're not actually relating to what's going on in front of us. They're
mm,
much more influenced by our history and the way we see things, what we've
mm,
developed in our attitude, those kind of things, than they are with the actual person that is in front of us. So So at one level, you can say, oh, well, it's all very esoteric, but at another level, it's all very practical, and that is that we don't override what the person says with our
Hmm.
idea of what they say. Right?
Hmm.
So in other words, we listen with fresh ears to the words that are coming out of their mouth, or what they're trying to convey to us, or not. But fresh ears means that we kind of dismiss that part of it that says, yeah, I know where they're coming from,
Hmm.
because we recognise that that's just an idea.
Mm.
Yeah, so there's kind of a conflict in my stories. I've got two stories about what is actual here, and um,
I
Yeah.
it
mean,
doesn't.
I mean,
I
I, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to add that it's that the stories can be going on, and it's like the sort of like a little the thoughts about that they may be still there or they come up, but it's identifying and believing them and sort of getting caught
Mhm.
up, identifying with those thoughts as being, um, you know, uh, being personal and believed. And so you can see a little bit, the thoughts can come up, but you just know that that's just noise, or
Right.
you identify with them. And then you can see because and there's normally some sort of body response too, if there's some sort of identification, if it's a contracting identification, like that's not me, or oh, that is me, then there's a movement towards. But both of those, there's some sort of identification with, whereas a free way of being is there might be some thoughts, but they're really in the background, and it's just the present moment
Mhm.
interaction without the thoughts coming in, taking some space.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That that all makes sense. So my experience now is of as me as the person that I have been, who's like touched into this idea that I have no agency and no ownership and no like, and that identity may just not be something that exists. Um, and so every time I, as the person that I am, ego or identified or whatever, like has any sort of friction, I just feel like I kind of remember that whatever it is that I touched into, and there's a little bit of relaxation around it. Like I don't understand it, and I'm gonna give up on understanding it because I understand that me as the person I am has no possibility of understanding it because I'm not a self. I don't. Yeah, I feel like I'm talking in circles because it's just there's no real way to express it. I get that quality about it now.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, come on in.
Okay. First of all, Ray, hi.
I,
I'm Kathleen. I can so relate to everything that you're talking about, like 100% of what you're talking about, you know.
Mm,
And and being caught in this, should I, shouldn't I, should I do something, should I not do something, you know, so there. Okay. I had a horrible month this month, just a lot of stories, a lot of things, a lot of issues, a lot of whatever, and got really wrapped into it. And then finally, it was like I went inside and was like, okay, so what's going on? And I said, you know what? I started Pranella's Awaken curriculum at number one.
mhm.
And I didn't decide to do that. The decision to do that came to me, and and I'm doing it, so I don't think you need to decide. I mean, you don't need to be worried about should I or shouldn't I. If something comes to you and you do it, you're being led, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense. Because I didn't make the decision to go back to lesson number 1. I'm really glad I'm there, because now I'm taking notes and I'm doing what I didn't do the first time I listened to her talk. But there was no decision to do it. It was like I got caught up in this last month of stories and drama and all this other stuff. And when I settled back down, it's kind of like my body said, okay, let's just get it together again. And that's a tool that I've used with Purnell. And I was like, well, let me just try that. And I'm so glad I did. I think I'm on lesson 3 now, but it's getting, I can so see where you are. It's like, because we want to know, what should we supposed to do? Where am I? What, blah, 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 blah. But the contraction and the expansion, I'm seeing that, because I was so contracted for like a month. And then finally, when I had a chance to go into the self, because I was doing all this traveling and I couldn't, I just couldn't do anything. I was involved in everybody else's life. When I came back to this, then I could kind of look and say, okay, let's regroup. But it wasn't a thinking regrouping. It was just, I just did it, and never in a million years would I think I'd started her curriculum over again. That wasn't a thought process. It just happened, And so I can so see where you are. We get so trapped up. Should I, shouldn't I? Am I doing the right thing? What else should I be doing? I mean, I'm all over the place with that. I can so understand it. And hearing you talk about it, I can see the reflection, the mirror, you and me, and go like, oh yeah. I can laugh, Vince, I can do your outside laugh. And I've been laughing so much this week because I hear this voice in my head. And then, I stopped the other day and said, what the fuck? Who's saying that? I was just like, get out of here, but it was because the thoughts come, they're going to come and they're going to go, and you can just go out, if you don't want to hear it, but then a lot of stuff you do need to hear. So I guess I'm kind of rambling now, but I just wanted to say, I can so understand everything that you're saying, and go with the flow, because boy, when you can get into that flow, things just happen, and I all kind of stuff happened. But anyway, I went to this party last night, and a reunion, and normally I go to the reunion and I get drunk and I have fun with my friends and we dance and blah, blah, blah. And so I made the conscious choice last night. I think it was a conscious choice. Maybe it wasn't. I was like, I don't need to drink. I can have just as much fun. I had a wonderful time. I danced and laughed, but I was there, and or I wasn't there, whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? I just flowed with whatever was going on, and it just took me over. So anyway, that's my rant for the day. It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it's just go with the flow.
Yep. And that's what Kathleen just said too. I was there, and then she suddenly realized that there was no self there, but I was there. Right? So it sounds like a contradiction, but I would say, rather than relate to her ideas about what was going on, she had presence. The happening that was happening was that she was connected, that she was present. Not she was, but there was presence, kind of thing. That connection, that contact, that full immersion into what was actually happening was there. Yeah.
Experiencing, I was feeling and tasting and seeing, and it was just all happening, and so anyway, that's me.
Did you guys ever consider that maybe you have fear of not existing, and that's why this narrative of a self is still lingers? Because if both of you have seen that there's only flow, things are happening, so what is the purpose of believing in a self if he or it, whatever, doesn't do anything? What's the purpose into believing into it? Maybe I think you both of you could explore the sensations in the body related to fear. Kathleen, you said about that you're watching the Pernilla's videos, right? Try looking at second factor stuff about fear. Maybe it will help you, because all of this is about doubt, right? Maybe that's it. Both of you should just feel the sensations of fear in the body. Maybe it would help both of you, because
Well,
again, it makes no sense to believe in a self that doesn't do anything, that has no agency. If there's no agency, there's no agent, right? So maybe this is why your minds are still insisting in creating in the narrative of a self, because you're afraid of letting go of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Matthias, the only thing is a little to sort of a little like a little bit of confusion is that there's fear of letting go of the self, but and I'm hopeless at remembering exactly, but you or something is afraid of or you are afraid of letting go of that fear, and then it's a little bit of a contradiction in a circle there, because I think that that fear comes, and a lot of the letting go, I mean, there isn't anyone letting go, but it happens in its own process. And when is fear that comes, maybe it's more of an organic, it's ready, the organism is ready to face the fear, because all of a sudden there is a confrontation, and the self structure as a type of survival mechanism, then the fear is generated. But it's not always so easy to generate that real confrontation with fear, to the extent that some people have described it almost of a death experience. I mean, there are degrees of intensity, but it's certainly true that fear, I think, is lurking. I'm not sure if
when I say fear, I am mostly referring to the body sensation that you apply the label of fear, not some kind of intellectualization of it, right?
Yeah, sure. But it's not always easy. The body sensation can be super intense. It's not necessarily easy to say, okay, I want to face my fear. There has to be to generate it just like that. I mean, there has to be a trigger on the survival mechanism, I think, to be able to go into the body and for the fear to present itself. It's not something that just can be willed into existence.
Well,
it can be
yeah. So the last month I said it was terrible, and I have been going into the body, and there's childhood trauma that's coming up, and it's like, where is it? And it's here up. It gets in my jaw. It gets in my here, and it's so weird because a few weeks ago I was like, we were talking about going into the body, and it's like it doesn't go below my neck. It really does. It doesn't hit me here. It doesn't hit. I don't get contracted here, but boy, does my face get contracted. And so as I've been going through these things with this last week, with these childhood traumas and all this other stuff that arose, I was like, okay, I'm going to feel this, and in feeling it, stories came, what it was about, but I just stayed with it, and things started to relax, and I can put it in its place. If it has a place, it's not in me anymore or whatever, and I've really, it's been really good, because you're right. You have to go into the body. you know, when you get that sense that something's not right, it's like, oh, where is it not right? You know, and so you're right. You do need to go with the body, and I'm so glad. I think that's why this week I've grown, if that's a word. I've seen more insights, and I've gotten more glimpses, and I don't know. It's just good, you know, good,
Yeah, great.
bad. It is
Yeah,
what
great.
what it is, you know. So thank you.
Yeah. So this brings me to another meme that I use frequently, and that is that it is never about what comes up.
Right.
It is always about what triggers that. And that is an invitation to get into the body as a way of getting closer to that trigger. Right? Our portal is the body. It's our doorway into what's going on underneath. Yeah. And so, of course, I think it would be a pretty universal what Matthias says is true, and that is that if we've had a lifetime of conditioning that there is a self running the show, and we've certainly had our parents telling us how to do that, try harder. Every school teacher said try harder, and do it right is what the injunction from our parents all the time. So that's really deep conditioning to do that. But it isn't about that. So when we talk about childhood trauma, which we all have, I don't think anybody's exempt from that one, to varying degrees, of course. It's not about the actual trauma. It's about how we coped with it. How did we respond to what happened, and how has that response evolved over our lifetime? Right? And almost certainly it happened automatically, right? It was an evolution of our response in order to keep us away from the shitty feelings that come up as a result of that stuff. But that's an invitation to get into that, not to the details of it, but get into the fact that something exists there that shapes our present behavior. So if you recognize that it's never about what comes up, it's always a case of the natural inclination is for us to get lost in what comes up. And that involvement, like I say that the analogy I use is that that's us reading the thought, the content of the thought story. We've opened the book and we're reading the content and we're living out the content. We're expressing the emotion that's involved in the content of that particular thought stream. Well, no way from that position can we see the bigger context, what triggered it, why it's there, right? We have to step outside of the story and just look at the title of that book, that story of whatever the thought stream is, and not engage with that even, but just look at the fact that it exists as a way to get in to what's actually going on. But that, again, that's something that we will develop and be more familiar with, not something that we can just decide to do. If we can't, if it doesn't happen, it's because we're still responding to those triggers. So, you know, you can be relaxed about everything. There's nothing to do. Yeah.
Vince, I have good news. Actually, during this week, finally, the deep shift happened. I've got awakened, and man, that's wonderful because it's not an experience, it's a deep comprehension of a fundamental truth. It happened because of a shock. I saw something that defied my mind. There was that external identification. I had already seen through self about a year ago, but there's still that lingering identification about the seemingly external world, about how things should be. And I saw something that completely broke the whole identification process in my mind. And when that happened, the attention shifted to consciousness itself. So I realized that it was all about just that consciousness. There's only now, no future, no past. You can predict anything. You cannot even want anything. It's just stories. There's no identification. There's nothing. But nothing changed in my experience on my sense doors. It's just that deep comprehension, that deep peace, stillness. Nothing moves anymore. There's just stillness around. Consciousness is just like it's everything. Phenomena are just permutations of consciousness. There's just consciousness always and always now. So I have no doubt that this is awakening, because everybody says that if you got something, it's not awakening. But I didn't got anything. It's just a new insight and a deep comprehension of things. And I'm very glad that finally this happens, and I feel a lot of peace, regardless of whatever happens. That's awesome. Really, that's awesome.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, it's a major thing. Yeah. But keep going. That's not the end. There's more. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Good stuff. I love it. Yeah. It's almost impossible to paint a picture because there's so many seemingly contradictory things. Contradictory is not quite right, but paradoxical. There's, we suddenly realize that yin and yang both exist side by side all the time. There's no good or bad. There's only good and bad, and there's neither. There's no,
And there's a whole space around this yin yang that's just your consciousness.
Yeah,
that's awesome, right? And it's free, open, vast, and complete. It's wonderful.
And something that comes with that you may already know, but I'll tell you anyway, is that desire to free the whole world, to wake up everybody. You can't fix that. Don't get sucked into that one. You can only help those who present themselves with a great willingness to change. Yeah. So even though you see somebody suffering and you can see how easily one sentence could be theoretically enough to change their experience, don't do it. They won't get it anyway. And not unless they're looking. If they're a seeker, okay. But if they're not, forget it. Don't even go close to them. Yeah. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on all of this, Kevin? How are you relating to what we've been speaking about? I guess a lot of it's close to home for you.
You must be psychic. I was hoping you would pick me. You did. Yeah. The structure of my life, my mind, everything I put in place, it feels like the structure's burning this week. Yeah. I'd love you to give me that sentence that would wake me up. But I'm less reactive than I was. I'm a completely different person than I was 12 months ago. But still, my wife is the biggest reflection of me, and she said some things this weekend that, triggered childhood trauma stuff, basically not being listened to, not considered, not respected. All those buttons were being pushed, and being in a place, yeah, it just feels like all the stuff is burning up big time. That's how I feel. So I'm not sleeping well. Got to work in a minute. So if I disappear, I apologize. But 20 minutes, I got to start work. And yeah, I'm not upset or needing dire assistance. But yeah, yeah, I'm in a kind of shitty place at the minute. Yeah.
Yeah, that shitty place could be a really good place.
Mm,
Not pleasant, but
no.
valuable. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Like
so when you say it's burning up, you're seeing this stuff turn up, and
Yeah.
because and somehow it's combusting when it turns up. Is that what you mean by burning up?
Yeah, it's more the emotion. If I was to describe it, it's like is it the word poultice or something, where you're trying to draw some toxin out of your body?
Yeah.
It feels like that. It feels like these toxic emotions they'd have to be, or it's beyond. Yeah, I'm fully identified with them, but at the same time, I can be in, like last weekend, we're on holiday. I was in a really peaceful place, but on the weekend, man, I was being fried. Three things came up, and I can only think of two of them at the minute. But it was basically, bottom line, I wasn't being listened to, or my wife had a falling out with a friend. I got invited somewhere by her husband, and I considered my wife and to ask if she wanted to go, and she said, "Well, was I invited or not?" And we went down that whole rabbit hole, and it turned out I hadn't sent the link to her that would have clarified everything. So it ended up being my fault, and that's just one example. And it ended up with me leaving the house, almost leaving black marks down the driveway as I left. So stuff like that comes up and sort of rattles my equanimity, as it were.
Yep,
And
yep. So when you were screaming out the driveway at 1,000 miles an hour,
yeah,
you're obviously totally lost in the emotion, right? So at what point, how long after did you realize that you had been lost? At what point did you go, I was totally absorbed in that?
not long, to be honest, because I came back fairly quickly. I think I checked the tire pressure, had a moment to think, and came back and sort of apologized for my behavior. But then my wife said something and it triggered something again. She didn't completely.
Didn't accept your apology.
The next day, she completely apologized that she behaved badly, but at the time, she wasn't ready. And again, I left black marks out the driveway and left again. Sort of drove halfway up the coast, and then I realized again, so I'm coming back quickly, but not quick
Good
enough.
stuff. Yeah. Oh, well, no, wait a minute. Where did this story come from about not quick enough, that it should be different?
From self-criticism, yeah.
Yeah. Can you see the ludicrous nature of it should have been different?
Yes.
The reality, of course, is that it was what it was, and it wasn't the way you interpreted it. Right? That also was what it was, but that was additional to the original situation. Right? So again, that meme, it's never about what comes up. It's
Yeah, I
always
love that.
about what triggers it. If that's happens to be a thought that stays in the forefront, then that's enough for us to immediately consider, rather than to get lost in the emotion. We would go, oh, I wonder what triggered that emotion.
That's gold.
Right? And can see that we are outside of
Yeah.
the content of that thought stream and the emotion
Yeah.
that goes along with it.
Yeah,
Right?
thank you. While you were
Now
talking
you
there.
can't do that, but you can invite it,
Okay.
kind of thing. Well, you can't even actually invite it, but inviting happens, and that's what we want. So we'll
Okay.
get better and better and better at not getting lost in those emotions as we consider that they rest on something else, and it's nothing to do with the circumstance, and nothing to do with what your wife said.
Yes.
It's what your wife triggered in you.
Yes.
Quite unconsciously, she triggered in you something that already existed,
Yes.
which was, they don't ever fucking listen to me,
That's it. Exactly.
or whatever version it was, you know? Yeah.
No, as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, what would have been the peaceful way to handle that? But I think that's it. It has to come out. It has to come up.
Yes, and to realise, yeah. And let's not put peaceful on a pedestal. That's
Mm,
just one of a huge
mm,
range of things that could be the case.
mm. Yeah, it
And
wouldn't have
and
been
all
authentic.
Yeah, although in the back of our mind we've got that we want this stuff so that we can be peaceful and calm.
Mm,
But the reality is that when you wake up, peaceful and calm is something that you appreciate in a way you haven't before, but
hmm
you'll also appreciate angry and sad
hmm
and the full range of human emotions become available to you. You
hmm
no longer get a body contraction and dip into the historical bank of how do we divert from that unpleasantness,
hmm
because we go, it is just what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
So the moment you get an idea of how things should be, the appropriate response is to just crack up laughing, because it's totally ridiculous. Any shoulds are ridiculous. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Yes, something that can be helpful too is because when we're just caught in the moment, I mean that the word's caught in the moment, but it can be quite useful to if there's still energy left in the situation, if it is to do a review and a review of what she said and just feel the surge of sensation, but don't get into any story, don't get into any even labeling of that it's an emotion. It's just energy response to what's being received. And then just look at that a few times and then start to be curious at the way there is an energetic sensational response in the body that to all sorts of things in the day, to what people say, where sometimes there's not even there wouldn't be a reaction, but other times there could be a feeling, oh, I could see that I could have, maybe there could have been a reaction, but I'm sensing this sensation, just seeing it as sensation, and sort of playing with that. And the way to start is to sort of just review a review of that intense moment when you had to get in the car and drive.
Tear away.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
gold. Thank you. Yeah, I have a natural instinct or pattern to move away from that exact thing. So I think I need to do that more. Thank you. Yeah.
So that's interesting when you say, I need to do that more. How is that going to happen?
Oh, I mean, yeah, be aware.
I'm
Be
just
more
playing.
aware.
Yeah,
When I'm not, be more aware. Yeah.
yeah. So there's this thing, and this highlights it. There's this thing. Like, yeah, I need to do that more. But hang on, there's no self here running the show. So how can that happen that I need to do more? I need to do that more. Well, that thought exists that I need to do more. Now we can get lost in that thought and we can go, well, that's a stupid thought. That's pretty ridiculous because there's nobody here running the show. So how can that happen? But there's another reality, and that is that there is that thought. Right? And so that reflects the fact that there still is a belief, however weakened it might be, that I can do something about this.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So isn't it interesting? That thought turns up, and what it tells us is, oh, hang on, there must be still a bit of belief here about that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And then what do we do about that? We don't say it shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
We just smile at the fact that we've discovered something.
Yeah. Intellectually or whatever, maybe more than intellectually, I know that life is a flow and life is controlling, not controlling it per se, but life is moving like currents in the ocean. Intellectually, I get that, but then here it is.
Yes,
Practically,
exactly.
in my space, it's not happening. My little portion of this universe, yeah, I see something, I project something onto that is or isn't there. So I'm able to change my projections in this little space of the universe, which is part of the whole. That's what I'm sitting with at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you say I'm able to change those things, if I say, hold up a hand now, hold up a hand. Right, so how come you put the left hand up and not the right hand? Was there a decision made to do that? No,
No.
it just happened. Right? So I'm able to is exactly the same as that. It's a happening that either occurs or doesn't occur.
Yeah. And I
Right?
attach something
And there's
to it.
that thought that turned up that says, I am able to. But that little example of how that hand ended up in the air and why that hand and why not the other one, and the fact that it just happened in a seemingly automatic way is a perfect example for life, for everything, absolutely everything that goes on.
When you said put your hand up, intuitively I wanted to put this hand up, but briefly I thought left or right. Thought came in fairly quickly. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. I've got to go and work. Unfortunately, I could sit here all day.
Right. Well, no matter what you're working at, this stuff will still go on in the background for you.
It will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I wonder if I could bring something up, Vince.
Yes, of course. Yes.
I think I mentioned the other day, I've been looking at Photo 4, and there's an exercise that Pernilla does, and I can't seem to. It's funny. I'm usually good at really listening to these videos, and there's one that I just. It's like a brick wall. It's just not. I get certain way through, and I just like I can hear the words, but I can't hear what it's pointing to. I haven't had that for a long time. And it's about want. It's about I think we briefly talked about it the other day. But since I've started looking at that, what I have noticed and then being more aware of is the wants. There's like want everywhere. I just noticed, and a lot of it is around. There's a lot of awareness about food, and for the last few days, there's been a lot of unconscious eating. And so there's a slight awareness of when I'm reaching for the food, but then it seems to go, it seems to go, and then it's in the body. And then I remember. And just as I just been tuning into the body as people are speaking, as the conversations have gone on tonight for me. And every now and again, there's a thought of because there's a chocolate bar in the fridge that I nearly ate, and I didn't eat tonight. And then, there's some popcorn. I'll go have some popcorn, and it just it just keeps coming. And this is very unusual for me because I don't really eat that much. It's almost relentless, and but then as you were just talking about feeling into the body, I was trying to. So I recognize the thought. As soon as it talks about food, I recognize the thought. And then I just started having a look to see what was going on in the body. So I couldn't quite figure out that. But yeah, I just wondered if maybe you could kind of steer me in the right direction.
Yeah, okay. So a few things pop up for me as you're talking. And so the last thing you said, I can't quite figure out what that was about. What is your, what are you doing when you're trying to figure it out? How are you trying to figure it out? Let's start with that one.
Okay. So the little insight I had as I was listening to the conversations was, I wonder if there's a correlation between. So it's not about the actual food. It wasn't about the actual food. I wonder if there's a particular sensation. I suppose I'm looking for a type of sensation.
Okay. All right. Well, so yeah. So perhaps we'll just go back a little bit to answer that. But when you're dealing with Theta 4-5 stuff, and you're looking at desire and aversion, you've got to be a little bit careful with the fetters because they have a really particular application that may or may not be relevant to what's going on at this point, you know. So recognizing, and you do, it seems, recognize that it's not about the chocolate bar, it's not about the eating, it's about what triggered that to come up.
Yeah.
And the portal into seeing what that might be is the body. The body, the sensations in the body is a way that you're going to get past the distracting mind. The mind is the first line of defense to take you away from unpleasant feelings. So the first thing that will come up when an unpleasant feeling starts to get active and you don't even realize it yet, it's so subliminal, right? But the mind will start going and we will start thinking about things as a way of diverting away from that sensation. But that sensation's there because of something underneath it. And so the first thing is if by becoming aware that the idea, that seemingly incessant, obsessive idea of eating that chocolate bar comes up, is a way of diverting away from what's going on at a deeper level. And so when you can see that, and you do, you see that, so you go into the body. Sorry.
I recognize that. I
Yeah,
recognize
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
about the food, it's something
Right.
else. Yeah.
So it's important also, and it's kind of as an aside, that the objective here is not to end something, not to fix something, not to say I just want to not have those thoughts about the chocolate bar. That's neither here nor there. Right?
Yeah.
The objective is to free yourself from something that's conditioned into you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's almost by the nature of the obsessiveness of it, it immediately shouts out very loud that, oh, I'm covering up something else that's going on. Because if it's just a want, then it's like okay or not okay, you know. But because it's obsessive, because it keeps on coming up and keeps on coming back around, you know, it's saying yes, something else is going on. So by then looking at the sensations in the body, that's not the end result, right? So that's we don't do that to fix the thing, although it can fix it. Well, when I say fix it, it can ameliorate the situation. But we're looking there is what's underneath that.
Yeah.
So it's going to we're going to go, okay, maybe there's a succession of things deeper and deeper and deeper that's going on, but we don't know that. All we know is that something's happening, and I'll dismiss the thoughts as a diversion and get into the feeling in the body, whatever that feeling is, and it's very likely going to be a contraction somewhere in the body. But by focusing on that sensation, the first thing we need to do, before we even think about the fetters, the first thing we need to do is go, is that resting on something deeper? Is there something else going on there? Right? So the fetters become appropriate if the answer is no. If it's just this situation that's created that, then the fetter work is appropriate. But if it's reflective of something that's going on at a much deeper level, then we need to do that. That's what we call shadow work. We need to get that out of the road first. And that's going to go back in history. That's going to go back to a belief that we have as a result of a repetitive situation when we were young, most likely. So we got to be open to both of those things. So the fetter work's appropriate when we've got all that shadow work out of the road, when we've got all that deep stuff gone, and we've just got, let's say, habitual residues of selfing going on. That's when the fetter work becomes appropriate. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, okay. It's definitely obsessive. It's definitely repetitive.
Mm.
Yeah.
But Pernilla, the second fetter, it doesn't go completely to trauma, but that does address this, with Pernilla, it does address sort of shadow, because you're looking in fear, anger, guilt, and shame. So you can still stay in the fetter model, but going back into and unless it really gets into trauma, and then you have to step out, because then you need to work on that.
Yeah, I do keep going. I recognize that because I've been back to Feta 2 a couple of times, but yeah, okay. Well, this is really helpful just to see how you work with the fetters. I hadn't kind of understood that, so that's really helpful.
Yeah, Pernilla works with them differently to others, and so she does address that deeper stuff as well, which is good. Yeah.
Yeah, she refers to it like a wheel, and my experience is I can be anywhere. I could be like looking at a 6 fetter and go straight back to 2, even 1. You know, just sort of looking at the 1 and then but staying in the 2, because there's there's an interplay that often leads to deeper stuff which hasn't worked its way up.
Yeah.
So they're all portals, and there's no linear. I mean, that is my experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
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 They do hammer that home at the beginning, and I picked that up. So yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what might
Sorry,
what
Vince.
might, yeah, that's all right.
Well,
What
thank
might
you.
seem to you on the surface is a fait four thing. I want that chocolate. Is not a fait four thing. It's a fait one thing. But that's irrelevant. So we got to be careful about that, because we go, oh, hang on, I thought I was past feta one. That means, well, it doesn't mean anything, because in fact they're all active all the time. So don't look at it in terms of that. But no, it's when we're dealing with fetters 4 and 5, we're looking at desire and aversion that is a habitual residue, rather than a reflection of something still active and deep.
Okay.
Right? We're just looking at the illusion of a button that says I want, or I don't want, or whatever.
Yeah.
With feta 4 or 5, whereas when we're going that there's a deeper belief there about something that I'm responding to, right, it's not even appropriate to put it in feta terms. That's a bit of a diversion in itself. Yeah. And
Well,
the
I'm glad I
fetters,
yeah.
go on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I need to do.
So becoming aware of the sensation isn't the end of anything. What that is the invitation, if you like, or that is the portal that you can use to go deeper. What is underneath that? What is underneath that? Keep going down to what is underneath that. And here's where we throw out the idea that all your thoughts are bullshit, and we go, okay, there are some relevant thoughts, right? And those relevant thoughts will advertise their relevance by the nature of them, right? So they're not a story that just wants to flood everything. What they are is a tentative offering by your intuition that says, maybe this is where you could look, kind of thought. And as a result of that being open and that invitation, you may well see what's beneath that bodily contraction or whatever, or you may get invited down to the next level to look at that. Right? And this is where what Matthews is talking about with that thing, the label we call fear, right? That as we get closer and closer to that stuff, we're more likely to experience resistance to getting there, because it's the monster under the bed thing, that part of us that says, oh, this is going to be catastrophic if you go there, or you better not. That kind of fear is what can turn up. But of course, that's just like any other thought, that the fear is the response to the thought, but you'll get there. You'll have the courage to do that. Yeah.
Well, it seems to be cyclical, and maybe this is something that keeps coming back, because that fear comes in different forms, and then I see something, and I see the monster under the bed and wonder what the fuss was about, and move forward. But it comes back. Well, touch wood, who knows? But it
well, if it comes back, that's good. That's worth celebrating.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah.
Because it's just a further invitation, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's what I mentioned last time, that I don't want to just speak when I'm feeling positive, or I want to come and kind of look under the bed in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that openness to do that doesn't mean that it's going to translate into actual experience easily. it can still be, phew. I mean, your thoughts are yours, and that what they trigger is they know you, they know where your buttons are, so they're very good at doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, with no such thing as trivial fear, regardless of what caused it, it's always something pretty substantial. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Have you done that meditation I put up? And so,
Yeah.
give me some feedback on that. What was your response to that? How did you feel as you were doing that?
I've probably listened to it 4 times altogether. The first two times, the next day I had no, Rowena. First 2 times the next day I don't know why I remember, but I was quite fearful. Quite a lot of fear. The third time I listened, the last 2 times I listened to it not before bed. I did it earlier in the day. And I kind of just sat a little bit more quietly. Instead of going straight to sleep, I sat with it. And so what came up is things that I hadn't remembered for many years. There's little things that I remembered that had happened. In fact, the last one brought up something that I had totally forgotten about. I suppose I don't really need to say what it was, but I couldn't believe that it felt quite strong in the moment. Like the emotion felt quite strong. But I had all these years, I totally hadn't thought about it. But it has played out in situations. It was about being in a car when I was younger. I was taken to school with my friend's dad, and he used to skid around, and I was really scared. And I asked him to stop, and they thought it was funny that I asked him to stop, and I was really scared. And all my life, I've been a bad passenger. So, it was that's what came up, totally out of the blue. So, yeah, it's just little things like that.
Yeah, okay, that sounds really positive to me. So,
Yeah.
would you say that there's room for modification of that particular meditation in order to make it more effective?
I don't know at the moment. Can't think of anything at the moment.
Okay, so that was a bit of a side thing anyway. That was just me wanting
Yeah.
to make that better. But it sounds to me great. It sounds to me really positive. I really like the fact that this is allowing you access to early memory that has had the effect of controlling behaviour in current life. So it's definitely how you can see what part of that meditation is how we bring the past back into the present, and how because if it stays in the past, it continues to affect our behaviour. And
Yes.
it's based on. I mean, there was probably, I imagine, I don't know the actual situation, but there's probably never any real danger with your friend's father skidding the car around the place. But there was real fear in you.
Terrified. Yeah.
Right. But now as an adult, you can see that you weren't going to die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So what I'm talking about here is that you can now bring an adult perspective to that child's perspective and update the child and bring that child back into the present rather than have it continually exist in the past, holding you back, keeping you a bad passenger.
Yes, that last bit is the bit I hadn't done. The bringing the child back. I'd recognized the situation and the memory, but yeah, I hadn't gone and sat next to that child.
Right.
I was still just watching from afar. Yes, judging the. Yeah.
Yep. So that last little bit is the resolution of that stuff. So that's good value to get into. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I wonder if when I was falling straight asleep that bit hadn't really kind of, I hadn't thought about that one, but when I did sit afterwards, then these memories came back rather than.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Okay, so that's I think that's 13 minutes long, that meditation, and I kind of base that on the fact that it's going to take about 20 minutes for people to go to sleep. But the reality is you may well go to sleep part the way through it. You go to sleep much faster, so you're not getting to the end. So ideally that resolution part is what you need to be going on in your mind as you go to sleep. So what I'm suggesting for you is if that you start it halfway through if you do it as you're going to sleep. So you get to the end of it before you actually go off to sleep. I want you integrating that young person into your present self as you go to sleep. That's the ideal situation with it.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give that a go.
Yeah. But I love the feedback. I love what you're saying. Is that it seems like my intention is happening. Not that I'm going to pat myself on the back for it, but it's rather good that that's having those results for you. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
I think the other thing I would just say is there's been a general it's been like a little nudge that maybe I'm seeing this from a not adult point of view. It's maybe a bit of a child's point of view. But,
Yep. So keep that as a question mark. Yeah, maybe not. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to kind of open things up a little bit for you, is that the possibility that wherever it comes from in the past is most likely, whatever particular age or whatever the particular circumstances, that you somehow discovered that eating was some kind of a resolution to the discomfort of that particular situation, and that eating a certain kind of eating, popcorn and chocolate kind of eating, that is a self-soothing or comfort food, if you want to put it that way, or whatever, that somewhere or other there was this discomfort that arose because of circumstances, and then the accidental discovery that, oh, if I go to the fridge or if I go to whatever, if I eat this kind of food, it works to get me away from that discomfort. Because the actual chocolate itself or the popcorn itself has a certain kind of satisfaction about it, a certain kind of comfort about doing that distracts you from whatever is underneath it. So that's like a discovery that gets made after the original trauma. I don't really like to call it trauma, but yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So when that discovery was made, and perhaps it was already there for other reasons or less intense things, but Yeah, so that evolves into something, and then we see it, we start identifying, oh, that's me. I go to the chocolate when certain things happen. That
Yeah.
identification with it becomes an issue, and then so all of this is stuff that we're, I want to say reversing, but undoing, yeah, kind of thing by seeing what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
But
definitely.
I love it. You're in a good place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for helping me with that. That's good. And especially with the feta work, how to what that's all about. And I hadn't, I just hadn't recognized that the fetters, you need to do that shadow work first, and the fetters are to deal with the residue. I hadn't seen that.
Mm, mm. That's a big one, yeah. And the feathers are something I experienced myself with the feathers. I mean, I had been, I don't know how, yeah, this sounds weird. Anyway, I'd been awake for, I don't know, 10, 11 years or something before I discovered the feathers, and I hadn't been seeking after the first 12 months at all. After doubt had gone, there was no seeking at all. And when I found out about the feathers, all of a sudden seeking started again. Right? So that's a big realization, there's that. So already that tells me that I had a belief that there's something yet to be done. Um,
Mm.
so it changed things. And I've seen other people grab hold of the feathers, right, almost like a life raft. They're really quick to grab hold of them. They really want to do the feathers because it gives them structure and it gives them a measurement of where they're up to and all sorts of things that are not really what's meant at all about the whole thing, but there it is. So they're a trap in themselves, the feathers. Well worth
Yeah.
considering as that. And Penilla's approach is a bit of an exception to that. She doesn't approach it in a linear, structured manner like most of the people who push the feathers. She's much more comprehensive and inclusive, so that's good. Yeah, but she's a little bit too much like that in a way, because any one of her videos will give you so much information that you could spend a lifetime just looking at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I resonated with what Kathleen said. I actually don't know how I even came across the Pernilla's stuff, and I didn't mean to start doing that. I just watched a video, and then I watched another one, and then I started making notes. And then she suggested coming to this group, and they just move on to the next video when I don't know when it just appears to or occurs to do. But
Hmm.
and sometimes it'll be a week. I might look at the notes, but then might be really keen to look at a video, but then it might be another week. It's very strange. It's not there's
Hmm.
no there's no grasping at it at all, which is weird for me. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's what life does, isn't it? It just seems to offer things at an appropriate time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot more like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
So I guess my question is, I would have thought that once one sort of gets used to seeing how you can kind of rest here and cut through a lot of the mind chatter, that it would just become this immediate self-reinforcing loop and you would just stay there. And that turns out to have been a very false expectation, or at least I'm finding that I still get really easily distracted. And even though I feel like I can increasingly come back here, and here feels increasingly vivid, I can tell that definitely there's a lot that I'm yet to see clearly. But it's at a point where, okay, if it properly comes into focus, everything else drops away. Whatever was bothering me, whatever, it's literally, it's not me, right? It's kind of just this immersive movie that's happening. But paradoxically, even though in the moment that can be seen very clearly, certain thoughts or certain situations, especially ones that require cognitive thinking or relationship to other people as a self, will just immediately recloud that, or like there isn't the trust in this that I can actually stay as the non-doing. Does that just happen over time, or is there you know, this is very unexpected?
Hmm. I, I, I guess I would put it in terms of a cleaning up process. You know, it's hard to imagine. It's when we kind of first start looking at this stuff, it's like, you know, it's really confusing, and then if some clarity turns up, and we go, oh yeah, okay, it's a lot simpler than I thought it was. But then our experience says, but it's a lot more complex than I thought it was. And so,
Yeah.
there is a lifetime of stuff that we've imbibed in, that's in us. That now now I kind of roughly divide that up into two areas, and one that is that there is this more uh, closer to the surface, superficial stuff, and then there is that shadow stuff, that deeper stuff. So both are likely to be involved, but who knows, So in a lot of cases, the superficial stuff is what gets cleaned up in the first seeing, and that's what you've experienced. But then you start to realize that, okay, no, this stuff still goes on. That's likely to be an expression of that deeper stuff that's there. Not necessarily, but it's just likely to be, yeah. And so all of a sudden we've got all of these other things that seem to come up, and the clue is that they'll keep coming back. They'll keep coming up and keep coming back, even though we see that there's no person here doing this, and we see that, so you can get, as you say, you can get in touch with this flow again fairly easily. But what that simply does is seems to push these things that come up into the background, and then as soon as you relax, they're back again. So that would suggest that, there is something still in there. There's a belief underneath them that is their foundation, and that's why they keep coming back. So every experience is like an opportunity to discover the existence of those beliefs that are there underneath. And I put it in terms of beliefs rather than in terms of stuff that's there, because they are beliefs, and if we can see them if we look for them like we are looking for a belief, then it can be much more direct, a much more direct way to get at what they are that's going on there. But at the same time, there's a contradiction or a paradox there, and that is that by trying to approach them so directly, that they can be more active in hiding, so to speak. So again, that's back to the fear that Matthias was talking about, that fear of dropping the self altogether. What will happen, kind of thing.
Yeah. I found so far, and I don't know if these are the same kinds of core beliefs or deep shadow work. I forget all the terms that people mention, but usually what has happened is I'll spend a lot of time, maybe, it's a session, maybe it's a month, just really trying to investigate something. And then usually not while I'm looking for it, just I'm out on some really long walk, a 2-hour walk or something. It'll just come up, and it's very anticlimactically simple, just like, oh, that's actually, I don't need to do that. And it feels completely out of proportion to the strength of emotion or resistance that seems to have been tied to it. Maybe that's part of why I don't find it in the moment, because I'm expecting to find this big, deep thing and then it turns out to be really nothing.
Yep, yep,
But it's, yeah, I cannot
yeah. The way
control
I
it.
put it is that the monster under the bed always turns out to be just a bit of a dust bunny. You know, it's,
Right, right. You just look at the giant shadow, right? There's a spotlight
yeah,
on
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. And that's exactly the thing. I mean, that experience is really, really common, you know, that we can work and work and work at this stuff and then give up, go and wash the dishes, and boom,
Right.
realization can pop in, you know, because we're not
Yeah.
defensive anymore. We're just relaxed. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That makes
yeah.
sense.
And so I would say that wherever there is constant discovery, uh, just enjoy that. There's nothing to do other
Yeah.
than that, you know, yeah. And when we're
Yeah, I
not
mean, I guess,
discovering something, right, it's like, oh, okay, well, come on, bring something on. I want to discover something else, you know. So we need some shit to kind of turn up in our life so that we got something to work with. But in the
right.
beginning, we don't. There's plenty of that there. So yeah,
Yeah, it's true. It's very humbling of no matter how many little insights or things that feel profound, and I've learned to not ever say like, "Oh, I'm done," or "Oh, now I understand it," or "Oh, now I figured it out," because it keeps
good.
coming.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always
Yeah,
amused when people say I'm done. You know, as soon as they say that, I go, well, that just shows me something. You
right.
know. Yeah, yeah.
I guess the final maybe recurring trap that I'm seeing, although now that I'm maybe starting to see its half-life is shorter, is um, there's still a very strong intellectual curiosity, and I don't even think that's a bad thing. It's there, it's part of me, but it keeps trying to assert that it is what's leading things, or it understands, or oh, I figured it out, I know this, and it's amazing how even now, many times, even if I'm just coming back to presence, I'll think, it'll be a conceptual thought of like, oh, there's no one doing anything, and then minutes later, I'll realize, wait, no, those I was just thinking that, and then I'll actually drop all of that, and
Yep,
it's
yep, yep.
clear that no, that was the mind. It thought it was doing it, and
Okay, yeah.
it's just
But all right,
changing.
so let's stop. Let me jump in here with this one. Yeah. I mean, that's a tricky one, isn't it? And it's a good one too. Um, what is that revealing in itself? See that you think that's about something else, but in itself it's something.
Hmm.
There's that thing that says uh, this process goes on. What triggers that? So we give exemptions to some things. We think, oh, that's not where the work is. The work is what that's about. But that in itself is indicating something.
I think I am following. I'm not sure I'm fully following in this case.
So just explain that process that you went through then again. But
So maybe I notice that I'm feeling stressed about something, or I'm resisting the fact that I'm feeling stressed, right? Feeling
yeah,
stressed itself is fine. Um, and so then that will sort of be an alarm bell of, okay, I'm lost in thought, or I'm lost in identification.
right. That's so
Come back
stop,
to presence.
stop. Yeah. So at that point, another thought's going to turn up and say, "Oh, I'm lost in thought." Blah 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 blah. In order to stop that being lost in
Hmm.
thought, right?
Mm.
But that misses the point that there's a reason. I don't like reason. There's a foundation that invites that lost in thought.
Oh, you're saying it was, I think I see. It's kind of whatever's happening is happening, which could be being lost in thought.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
maybe
so
this is more.
it's a diversion to say the appropriate response to being lost in thought is to be not lost in thought.
Mm,
Now that while that's true, that can be a way of missing what what is being achieved by being lost in thought. Right? So if we go, then the answer to being lost in thought is to not be lost in thought, then what we're doing is ignoring the reason why we were lost in thought.
Is
And
it
being lost
possible?
in thought was an
Yeah.
achievement. That itself was a diversion from something else that was going on. So just to stop
Oh,
it doesn't take us to what that was about.
right. Okay.
Just to stop it takes us to the next thing.
Actually, I don't know if this is what you're getting at earlier. Something that I have really started to notice is how often there's a default tendency to immediately go to thoughts or go to the mind when there's an unpleasant feeling or an unpleasant something. And it's surprisingly sneaky to try to not do that. And it's started to happen just a little bit of, oh, just stay with this or stay with that. But it's immediately attention wants to go essentially not here.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so from now on, for a while, let's plant the intention to not just end that, but rather to see why that actually happens in the first place.
Okay. Right. That's actually a really that's an indicator. There was a thing. There was something that
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes,
ah
yes.
oh that
And
makes it
it's
juicy.
also presenting you with the portal, with the doorway to look at that. But by going, let's just end it, you're missing
Right.
out on that.
I see. I like that. Okay.
Now, something else you said that I'd just like to reflect on a moment is the word curiosity. You said
Hmm.
curiosity. If you look at it directly and in some detail, you will see that what curiosity is a sense of, oh, I wonder what is that about? I wonder. Right? So it's an opening, an inviting thing. It's not seeking per
Mm,
se. Okay, you're not looking for something that you're imagining,
right.
right? You're open to whatever turns up.
Right.
That's curiosity. Whereas seeking is looking at the world through the cardboard insert in the toilet roll. It's kind of looking through with a very narrow focus, looking for something. Right? When you look
Right.
through that toilet roll, there's a word hanging at the other end, and that's what you're aiming to find. So you've got a fantasy about the future and finding something when you're seeking. Whereas when
Hmm.
you're curious, there is no defined end result. It is just a case of, I wonder. It is
Yeah, it's
just
more sort of open-ended or
openness.
playing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that is appropriate.
Okay. That's an important distinction. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Vince, I don't really understand this fear that people have when they hear the message that there is no me, no agency. But I think what I feel the most is this state of mind when I think I should do something. I have to make a decision. I have a choice to make.
So are you saying that gives you comfort, or that? I guess what I'm hearing you say is that you don't experience that fear.
Well, it gives me comfort to think that I don't have a choice.
Mm. Yes, rightly so. If you don't have a choice, you can't do it wrong.
Yes, and well, in my worst panicked states, it was about that I have to decide, and I don't know what should I decide, and it was the worst.
Mm. So you're already in a state where you don't experience that fear because you're not, you've got nothing to lose. You're already seeing that there isn't anybody running the show at one level.
But it's yeah. But I've I wonder if for me it is a kind of spiritual bypassing. You know,
Yeah, well, that may be
because it's
some. Yeah.
it's a bit like I have a big decision to make, but instead I fall asleep.
Okay. That my mind immediately said,
I'm just running away.
yeah. My mind said, yeah, that sounds a bit like diversion. If we go to sleep to avoid the decision making, yeah. So it's not a real appreciation that decisions will happen because you feel I've got to make it, and so you avoid it by going to sleep. Yeah,
Yes, in the
yeah,
end, decision will happen. I want to avoid this panicked state.
mm, mm,
What should I do? What should I do?
mm.
But it can be triggered.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my interpretation of you, and that's all it is that one of the things that you're blessed with is you've got a kind of I don't know how to put it right, but it feels to me like almost like you've got a mechanistic view of how things work. You have that scientific, deductive mind that kind of sees things objectively. So that's a big advantage, but it could also be an escape from that panic about having to make a decision as well. So who knows? But it's an advantage and a disadvantage maybe. But regardless, there it is, and that's just my interpretation, which may or may not be even close to accurate. Yeah, yeah. So those people that have spent a lifetime honing their their decision making in order to achieve outcomes, and if they're successful with those outcomes, in that the decisions they apparently make align with the actual happenings, uh, they're under the delusion that the reason that things are successful is because of what they do. Then they're going to lose a lot if they give up that feels what it feels like for them. And that's
Yeah,
their
but for me, it's just losing a lot of panic and a burden.
Yeah, so I guess what we're about here mostly is fine tuning that view of how things work, recognizing, and because of the fact that a lot of paradoxes exist, a lot of contradictory things seem to exist side by side, it kind of gets a bit tricky to do that. But that fine tuning about how things actually work and not from a textbook, but from our own experience, recognizing what happens to us is showing us something. That's the big one. Yeah.
May I ask a question related to that?
Yeah.
When if there's one of these moments where there's some high stakes feeling decision, right, that has to be made in the moment, does it feel like those thoughts of, going back and forth, A or B, or this decision for this reason or that reason, does it feel like those thoughts are what are driving the action, or sort of are causal, are kind of, they are making the decision? Or does it feel like in the moment, reality is doing something, reality will make a decision, and then there will be thoughts about that? Or maybe neither of those.
So how does it feel to you?
Me? Or sometimes the first, sometimes the second. Depends
Could be
on
either.
how
Yeah,
lost
yeah.
in thought I am. When things are more not distracted, thoughts feel more like they're a part of this that is happening. But then when I am more distracted, thoughts feel like what I am doing. And so the stakes feel high of I am responsible for making the right decision, or I will be affected if there's a bad decision.
Yeah, see, it's different for me to both of those. So I couldn't say that I don't have thoughts, but at the same time, I can't tell you what so many of those thoughts are about. They're just so far in the background that there's no notice taken of them. So there's no memory of them, and they don't feature as thoughts as such. They're just like my tinnitus. They're just something there in the background. And so to pull in another phrase, and it's a good one, is there's just chopping wood and carrying water. That's so.
Right. So, well, maybe
Yeah.
I articulated it poorly, but so to, Bianca's question, if you, Vince, had some big decision that you had to make, would you describe it as essentially the decision would just happen? Not necessarily even a thought. By that, I just mean maybe you're making the decision by sending an email, right? That just happens. And then there may or may not also be a thought about it. Or if someone asked you what you're thinking about it, thoughts could bubble up to explain the decision and justify it. But it's more like reality, or it just happened.
Yeah, yes. Yes, if somebody invited me to have an opinion, for example, then thoughts may turn up about that, but essentially the other stuff just happens. But what's worth pointing out is that there's kind of a level of trust that says I don't have to agonize over this. What comes up will do the job, or not. And both are equally possible. But it doesn't matter. It's not if it doesn't, then that just gives rise to the next thing.
I think I am talking about this situation. When the decision, well, for me, decision just appears. I don't make a decision, it just comes up.
And when that decision turns up, When that decision turns up,
But
what's your relationship to it? How do you feel about it? You don't even think about it. It's just a decision that's there to be used.
yes, but let me finish my thought. There are also situations where decision does not appear. I can't decide because
Actually,
and
I sometimes some time ago I was reading a research paper that tells that actually the ego makes up a story after you make a decision, and it just justifies the decision. It's not the cause of the decision. So yes, what is meant to happen will happen, and also not taking a decision is itself a decision. You know, maybe there's something about it that you're not seeing. The mind always lies and the body always says the truth. So maybe you're not acting because you're not meant really to act. There's also this possibility.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is Bianca, you can say if this does or does not align with your experience, but building on what Matthias said, I've certainly noticed in myself, it's easier to notice if it's a low stakes decision, but similarly, if I kind of get stuck in analysis paralysis or no decision is appearing, and I'm even trying to think, okay, it'll just happen on its own, that I have this resistance because there's this idea that a decision should be made, but there isn't one. But trying to push to make the decision happen are thoughts that are carrying the assumption that they are the ones, like they could make the decision, right? Like that the thoughts, if they push hard enough, they could make the decision. But that is completely undermined by if it's just, if that's not true, if the thoughts never would be what made the decision. And I'm not saying that I successfully see that in the moment. It's sort of reflection after the fact. May not relate to what you're saying, but I was reminded of it.
When you try to push for a decision, it might sound a little counterintuitive, but when you push for a decision, you just will you will just stimulate even more that freeze response, because the freeze response is itself kind of a doing or not. If you actually want to do something in a more active way, actually the most reasonable thing to do is try to calm down and let the body do its thing, you know, because when you get agitated and you try to push it, you're going to get, you will freeze even more, you know.
Well, an example came to mind. It's like I am riding a bicycle and I have to turn left or turn right, and I don't know. But if I don't turn, I will run into a wall.
So when you're getting close to the time where you need to turn in order to not run into the wall, probably a subtle part of you will be shouting out, go left or go right. Your body will tell you. The bike will lean. So there will be, how can you put it? That decision has been made, even though you're not aware of it. And if you're just totally afraid of running into the wall, then that may overshadow the decision that was made. But if you're relaxed, like Matthias was saying, if you're calmed down, then you're much more open to getting the message from the bike or the body about which way to go. But the body's not going to run into the wall.
For some reason, I've started to think that maybe this is exactly what my body wants to do,
Oh,
to
that's
run
possible
into the
too. Yeah,
wall.
yeah. I hadn't thought of that. That is possible. Yeah, yeah. But 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 that may be an
but it's
indication.
but it's so irrational and illogical that my mind can't take it. And
Well, this
you
this
have to
whole
decide. You have to
yeah
decide.
this whole thing is irrational. Because it's what rationality is what got us into trouble in the first place.
Anytime I think I'm being overall a very rational human, it's because I'm not actually looking honestly at how I'm making my decisions.
And an interesting one, Casimir, is that if no decision turns up, that in itself is saying something. It's telling you something. So it's not like, because we presume by the very word decision and our idea of what a decision is that there are choices involved, that there is control involved, and none of those things actually exist. And so when a decision doesn't turn up when it's required, um, there's a reason for that, and that's an indication of something else. So again, that meme, it's not about what comes up, and let's add to that, or doesn't come up. It's about what triggers that situation. So it could be that in Bianca's case, being overwhelmed by the need to choose left or right means that running into the wall is the best option. There's relief in that. But that says that
Yeah.
something difficult
So
about making that decision to go right or left.
maybe it's because I didn't want to ride this bloody bicycle in the first place.
Yeah, they made me do it. Okay. Yeah. There's always another alternative, isn't there? You're really good at bringing those ones up for me. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I can kind of see a parallel between sort of Vince, what you were saying and what Matthias was saying of the ego of the mind just kind of confabulating these stories of if I think of it almost like awareness is just watching this movie play out. And it's, the mind or the thoughts aren't the director, but it's really in the habit of telling itself that it is. So as the movie is happening, the thoughts will say like, well, I chose to do this, or I chose to do that, or, I'm the main character. And so then the movie's doing whatever it's doing regardless. But yes, maybe if you notice these thoughts get really revved up, then you go back to see, okay, what about the movie caused
Yeah,
that to happen?
exactly. Yeah.
And
So the
then as you
thoughts are
say,
like the commentator at a football game
yeah,
or at a sports event, So you got the game and then you got the commentator. And
right.
if you only had the radio, then the commentator's all you've got, right? And back in the
Mm.
old days, he used to tap his pencil on the table on the microphone in order to emulate the sound of a cricket ball being hit. But essentially, you've just got the commentator, you haven't got the game, right? Or if
Mm.
it's on television and you turn the sound off, so you're not hearing the commentator, you've just got your interpretation of the game, right? But
Mm.
you're much closer to the actual game, and especially if that commentator's, what it turns out is that you're watching a football game between these two people and the commentator's actually watching a game being played by somebody else, and he's not even relating to the actual game. But I mean, even if he is, it's still only his interpretation. So it's not the game itself. So thoughts are like the commentator. They can be on track or they can be off track or they can be whatever they are, but they're not the game. They're just the commentator. Yeah. And it's actually a really, really interesting exercise to do that's valuable at Liberation Unleashed to help people appreciate the difference between their perceived reality and what is actually going on, is to watch a snippet of a game of any kind of sport on TV with the sound off, and then turn the sound on and notice the difference when you're listening to the commentator, how much of the game are you actually seeing. Turn the commentator off and notice how much of the game are you actually seeing. Because when you turn the commentator off, your own commentator gets going too. You know,
Yeah,
the
it's like,
mind
I don't know if
starts.
this is stretching the analogy too far, but it's as if the players can hear the commentator, so it's being boomed back at them. And so
Yeah,
if the commentator starts saying something that's unrelated but is worrying, then the players will react to that. But I don't know.
that can. In our, it may not be a good analogy for an actual game, but it's certainly a great analogy for the way things work for us. Absolutely, yeah. Because we do respond to thought. Uh, so if the commentator says that's a goal and we throw our arms up in the air and celebrate the fact that it's a goal and it turns out not to be a goal, it doesn't matter. See, we've responded to the thought. We've responded to the commentator. Mm. So how do we? This is an interesting one, and it's certainly something I experience, and I don't know how to communicate it really well. But how do we allow life to make those decisions? How do we allow life to direct what happens for us? Right. So this is a really big one, but it's also very subtle. You know? So the first thing is the first thing is not the first thing. We can say that we need to have a level of trust, right? But recognizing that trust isn't something that actually exists, right? What it is what we describe as trust is the absence of resistance, right? So when we're allowing life to direct us, and that's a total bullshit sentence because we're not allowing, and there's no such thing as life, and there's all of that. But regardless, you know what I mean? When we're allowing that to happen, or when we're inviting that to happen, what's actually going on, right? So to start with, there's an attitude that says there's a willingness here, which means that there isn't a resistance. There isn't a mistrust about the outcomes. And so for a start, we have to go, oh, okay, so I'm open to whatever turns up as a result of this. And so there's already not that narrow focus of what the outcome needs to be. We're open to whatever life offers as a result of going with that thing. So when a story turns up that says, oh, well, if that happens, then that's likely to be the outcome. Right? And that's just what mind does. So what I did for a long time after when that first started to happen was I would just append, to the end of it or not. You know, you could even imagine it in brackets, you know. So that's going to happen or not. Right? So it opened things up to the possibility that I don't have a fixed outcome here. So with that lack of resistance, with that trust that things are going to be okay, there's a put it just an accepting attitude. There's an openness. There's a question mark. There's a tentativeness. It's possibilities. Possibilities are the big thing. Not even probabilities, just possibilities. But like
something,
yeah, go on.
something that I've actually found very helpful in this is something that I think you said a long time ago, might have been years, when I was kind of just getting started out, which is this idea that you can really, really zoom in and to the time-wise, and the only thing that's actually ever happening is exactly now. So not just this second, like this nanosecond, sort of like immediately this moment. And it's kind of a different take on, I don't trust this, or the mind doesn't trust this, and maybe over time and exposure that builds. But what I'm finding can work or help is in those moments, I don't need to trust that this outcome will be okay or that outcome will be okay if attention zooms into exactly what's happening now, because all of that outcome, this count, that's all future imagined thought. And it's this weird thing of, until I do that, I don't even trust that that will make things okay. But then if I can kind of almost negotiate, well, let me just try it. Once I'm there, everything is fine. If it's just watching what's happening exactly right now, there is no decision being made. There is no this outcome or that outcome. It's just exactly this.
There's this, yes, just this, yeah. Yeah, there's what comes to mind is that anything to do with decision is about an outcome in the future. But what we're talking about is the base reality that stuff happens. That the need for or the desire for a decision in order to bring about an outcome, that happens in the real world. Right? The fact that all of that's a story about the future is almost irrelevant in terms of what we experience. Knowing that is the case can change our experience. But we don't want to just bypass. That's the thing. We don't want to go, there's no one here, so therefore it's irrelevant, because the reality is that is an experience that we're having. And we don't want to deny that actual experience. We want to learn from it. So we can't ever, no matter what we say here with this stuff, we're always swimming around in a paradox, a sea of paradoxes. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of another, I guess, paradox or tricky thing recently of, and hard to put into words, maybe you can help me with it, but sort of false non-doing, which is really active non-doing, where I think like, oh, I'm not doing anything, or reality will take care of itself, but really I'm actively being passive versus actual not doing, which is, again, I don't know how to describe it, but when it's just allowing things as they are. And I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier of my mind will often try to own or accost or say, oh, I understand this. And whenever that's happening, it's this sort of fake non-doing or active passiveness.
Yeah. And this is about recognizing those things when they happen. And because each one of those things that we recognize tells us something. We don't know what it tells us sometimes. We just know that it tells us something. But usually that is an opening that we can look through. Yeah. It's almost an ultimate human paradox, is that we feel that we have to be doing something. We know that we can't be doing anything. And that yet we are, and we're not at the same time. We think we are. There's that effort. We're efforting about it, but still, it's in spite of all of that, it's still just happening.
But, the commentator can go on and on and on about how effortful that goal was, but the commentator's not the one that scored the goal.
Exactly, yeah. And another analogy that I like, with all of this stuff, so I'll use a koan sometimes that turned up that says, "How do you do not doing?" So there's no answer to that. But also there's this other side of it, which is pushing the river. Right? The river's going to flow to the sea regardless. It's going to flow downhill. That happens. So, but if you get in there and start pushing it, right, you're going to use a lot of energy to achieve what's going to happen anyway. And just to take that analogy a little bit further, the interesting thing is, let's say you're in the river, in the middle of the river, and you're floating quite comfortably, and the river's rushing down at a rate of knots, but your experience is stillness. You're moving at exactly the same pace as the river. It's supporting you, and the flow is what you could describe from outside the river, that there is flow, but your actual experience is that there's no movement, because you're going at exactly the same pace as the river, because it's supporting you and taking you down at that pace. And so you can say, "Oh yeah, I'm in the flow here. And look at this. I'm in the flow. The river's taking me." But that's not your experience. There's no flow in your experience. Experience is perfect stillness.
Yeah, as you're saying it, oh, go ahead.
No, just what it's the difference between I have to and I want to. It's not like I can do the wanting, but there is wanting, and it's scaring me. It's like we are like this river, and then things happen, then it would take more effort to not do.
Yeah, I feel like if this is what you are sort of saying, there's a relationship between how important it feels that the perception of the future go one way versus another, and how effortful what's happening now feels. Of if it's just, oh, I want this, or not even like, it's just to, Vince was saying, curiosity open of whatever is happening now is happening, and there's no sense of personal threat or concern, then it is effortless. But if there's this belief about, well, this future scenario will be bad, I need to make sure that doesn't happen, then it's trying to grab hold of the river and control it one way or another, and then it feels effortful, because it feels like, I don't know, the stakes are high. And then I think, as you were saying, that's more like I need, as opposed to a softer I want, or I'm just here for the ride. But maybe that's not what you were saying.
Yes, I am coming back to this example of riding a bicycle, and it happened in my life, and with yes, there were things that I thought it will be a disaster, but it was a very good disaster. So much of this is that, but I think I know what will be good for me and what will be bad. And the reality is I have no idea what will be good and what will be bad, and nobody knows.
I presume that you feel okay, even relaxed about the recognition that one is an illusion and the other one is the reality that nobody knows, that you don't know. You feel okay about that?
Yes, it is wonderful to realize that running into the wall on this bicycle is the best thing that could happen to me.
So have you always felt that, or is that recent?
Well, it is just what I feel at the moment.
Oh, okay. That recent.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it can change very much. Hmm. You know, recently I thought it's maybe it's not even for me necessarily. But it's the best, but who knows if for me.
So when you say that running into the wall will be the best option, there's a kind of a how can I put it? There's a narrowing there of possibilities. You know, so you've got left, right, or into the wall. You know, one is better than the others. We're talking about outcome again, aren't we?
Right now, when I was talking about this example, and I've it was, you know, it was like in real time, and I was describing this, but I have to turn right or turn left, or otherwise I will run into the wall. So otherwise, a disaster. And then it's like I felt it, that if I run into the wall, it's because what I really wanted, not consciously.
Yep, yep.
And it is so understandable. Like it can't be otherwise.
Yes, of course. Yes. Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, so where would a fourth option fit? And let's say the fourth option is not left or right or into the wall, but put the brakes on and stop.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even think about stopping, did we? Because there was some attraction to running into the wall, whether that was just to avoid the decision of left or right, or for whatever reason that was. There seemed to be some satisfaction in that option. So the fourth option of putting the brakes on and stopping didn't even occur. It wasn't really an option. It didn't come up as an option. So what that tells us is that there's something there that it appears as if running into the wall would satisfy. Even if that was just to avoid making a decision about right or left, or something deeper, who knows? But regardless, it would seem that we describe that as the best option because there's some satisfaction in that. There's some outcome that is desirable. And at this point, we're not even thinking of riding the bike anymore. We're thinking of what might be underneath the whole thing that makes running into the wall a bit seductive.
There was a satisfaction in understanding.
And understanding what? There doesn't need to be an answer for that one.
And conditions.
And yes, yeah.
Causes.
Mm. So it's the process is a widening of perception, isn't it? It's an opening up and looking at more possibilities and seeing the bigger picture is very definitely part of that. Yeah.
But is it true, or am I just making another story that it's
Who knows? Yeah. But just another story is not just another story. And if it is another story, that's also true. But what the story is about is another story. But we do ask that question all the time. How right is it? How relevant is it? Is it true? All of which is a rabbit hole that's not really worth going down. But the fact that the question arises, that's relevant. So why do I want to know if it's true? What's behind that? We're so easily sucked into seductive stories. So quick and easy do we slip into them that we almost always overlook what they're resting on. Or what's triggered them. Same thing. Yeah. Okay, well, we're just coming up for 3 hours, so we'll wind up, in a moment. All right, well, let's call it a day, hey? I'm just constantly amazed at how 3 hours can go by in about 4 minutes. It just happens. Yeah. Okay. All right. See you all next time. Good stuff.
Thanks.
Another good session. Love it. Thank you.